All right, I finally come to the spot time when I'm going to show you how to put a button on. This is one of my blouses, and I lost a button here. Well, I didn't lose it, thank goodness. I cut it off before I lost it. So I've got the button here, and you see it has two little holes, and some have four holes, and some have a little knob in the back without any holes at all. So this particular one is simple enough because we just put the thread through one hole, through the material, back up and around. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So I happened to manage to find a thread very close to the color of my shirt. Now, if you can't find a particular color, use one that's close next to it. Like even a white would probably not show up in a button. Don't use a black, of course. Now, because I'm old and my eyes don't see well, I use a thread puller. Now, that doesn't mean anybody else can't use a thread puller even if you're not old. This is what a thread puller is called. It has a little wire at the end. Now, I take my nice little sharp needle, and I see that little hole that my eyes can barely see. I put my thread puller through that little hole. Oh boy, that's going to be a job in itself. It's thick, so I'm just going to make it thinner. I mean, it's wide, not thick. Now I've got it through. If you can see, I don't know if you can see that. I got it through there, through that little hole. Now I'm going to thread my little thread through the bigger hole. I'm just going to put it right in there and pull it through. So I have the thread in. We can see the thread is in. Now I hang on to my needle, and then I just pull the thread puller back through the tiny little hole of the needle with the thread. Now, because it's the thread and the thread puller are thick, you have to kind of give it a little bit of a nudge. Okay, so that's what that little silver thing is when you see it in your little sewing kit. That helps you get the thread through the tiny little needle. Now, for the most part, I don't have to use these tiny little needles because I usually catch my my button before it falls off, and then I don't have an issue. So, well, that doesn't mean anything. You still have to get the thread through the thread puller, but I'm not very rough on my clothes, so the older you get, the less activity you do. So now I've made a knot at the end of the thread. The needle's on one side, so I've doubled the thread, and I've put a knot on this side. Now, I find where I lost my button. Usually you can see the little holes, and I think you probably can. There's two little holes there. So I put my button, and make sure you put it right side up, not right side down. Usually you can see there's a rounded end on the bottom where it goes down, and a flat end on top. And you just put it right where the two little holes are, and then you start on this side, put your needle through, and look for the little hole. So I found a little hole, pull the thread through to the knot, and then go to the other little hole right beside it. I don't want to go through the same hole that I came up on. So at this point, my grandson said, "Is that all there is to putting a button on?" I said, "Yeah, that's all there is." So then I go back and forth through those same holes to create a nice strong anchor, because that's what I'm doing. I'm anchoring the button to the material. I do it maybe 7 or 8 times. And if it's a button that you put a lot of stress on, go back and forth 10 or 12 times. There's no right or wrong. There's no exact number of pulls that you need to do. You just have to kind of be aware of the stress that button is getting, and just anchor it as best you can. So, all right, I think that's okay for this button now. So I bring it through the end, and this is the little thread that I have my little knot on. tangled up. And that's easy enough to do because your thread just winds around and then you get caught on anything. So now I'm just going to anchor the thread on this side. So I go back and forth here a couple times. Oh, 3-4 times. So now when I cut the thread, it's not going to unravel. Then I take my scissor, cut the thread right to the bottom, and at the same time I'll cut that little thread that I had the knot on down to, don't, for heaven's sakes, don't cut the knot, because then it all unwinds, but cut above the knot. And there's your button. Now, in order to show you how to fix a hole, I made a bit of a hole. Didn't do much because I don't think you need to see lots about sewing, because sewing is just as simple as putting a button on. So I made a hole in my material. It's on the seam. Now that's exactly pretty much the only place you want to fix a hole, on the seam. If you have a hole in the middle of your shirt, it has to be mended, and that's a completely different thing altogether. So now you see I've got my hole, and I'm just going to clean off all the pieces of material or old thread that kind of sticking out, so it's not in my way and it doesn't get all tangled up with the sewing. And I can use my same needle and my same thread because I haven't used much. I'm just going to, again, one more time, make a knot at the end. You know, things are never as hard as they seem to be. So if you see that the edge is serged, that means a machine went over the top as well as a line in the base. So I'm not using a serger, I'm using my hands, so I can fix that serge a little bit after I make the base. So I just go to the very beginning of the hole, past the beginning of the hole, so where it's already still, thread is still attached, and then I just go into the material and then back. I can see where my needle comes out. I don't have to look on the other side. And my little thumb finger here is feeling where the needle is coming through. So I put my needle back in, pull it out, and then put it back in again. Now as time goes on, you don't have to keep pulling it in, pulling it out. You can just kind of make a line with your needle, and I'll show you how to do that next. You want to try to keep that line pretty straight, and that's why it's easier to do it this way. Now this way I go in, and then feel where my needle is, and bring it back out, push it in, bring it back out. So I've made two stitches right there, and I just pull my needle through. See how easy that was? And now I'll do that same thing again. I'll go in, and this way you want to keep your stitches uniform too. So there, and you're staying in the same line that your previous stitch was, because you can even see the little holes when you're doing that. And you gather it up too tight, you just pull it back. Keep it straight, nice and straight. And then I do it again. In, then back out, and create those little, now I'm doing 3 little stitches. You get more confident, you can do 3 stitches too, or 5 stitches, I don't care. Do as many as you want. So you just keep your threads nice and neat. You don't want any gathering or any sticking. Sometimes you get a little loop in the thread, but you just pull it straight. One side or the other, one piece of thread or the other wasn't pulled exactly straight. So again, I go back in and out, and now I'm already on the part where it's already been sewn. So see that little loop there? Well, I just have to kind of straighten it out and then pull it. Sometimes it'll twist itself up. That's okay. Don't, for heaven's sakes, don't cut it. Just take your time and pull it out. Now, just like we did with the button, I want to anchor this thread. So I'm just going to go back on myself. I'm going to go just take a stitch and keep going back. So I'm kind of like double stitching. I'm not going that 2-3 stitches because I don't want to do that. I want to go 1 stitch at a time. I'm anchoring that thread nice and tight on the same stitches that I had already gone one way, I'm going back the other. Now, if you're left-handed, which my grandson is, I feel sorry for you because it's so much harder to teach a left-handed person. But it doesn't mean you can't learn, and it just means that a right-handed person teaching you is going to look awkward for you. So you're just going to do, instead of starting on this way going that way, you're going to start on this way going that way, so that it's easier for your left hand to work. I have a number of left-handed kids. And it's always hard to teach them. Okay, I've gone about 4 or 5 times already. You can see that I've already gone over. It's hard to see because the color is the same. But I've gone over my own stitch. So now I'm just going to cut it off. Oh, I got a very dull needle. And if you want to base a serge like the top, this top is serged, you could do that too. And I'll show you what's left of my thread. I'm just going to make a knot again. And then I just go to the top and I go over, and it's called a blanket stitch. It doesn't matter. You don't need to know. I was in 4-H back in the day, so I learned how to do all these things. That's a long time back in the day. I know 4-H is out and about in the country for cattle and animals. It would be wonderful to see 4-H for economics come back. I learned about cooking and sewing and knitting and crocheting. Not that I really bothered with heck of a lot of any of that when I was a kid, but it did help me to recognize that I did it once, I can do it a second time. So this now kind of just catches the top raw ridge so that it doesn't stick out too much and fight against. That also tightens your own stitch because now it's tight on top too, so it has a second layer to hold the stress of the area where that tore. Usually something tears because there's stress on it. So that's usually why you want to make it a little bit stronger when you sew it back. So there we are. I sewed it. Now I've got the edges, the edges that are left over, and for heaven's sakes, put your needle somewhere where no one's going to get hurt. I usually just put it back into the thread loop. The thread holder. What's it called? I can't remember. Doesn't matter. There we are. Simple enough. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to iron this. So I'll be back with you as soon as I set up. Right. So that was sewing on a button and fixing a seam. I was going to show you the ironing as well, but that'll make this video very long. So the next video I'm going to make right after this one will be about ironing. And that same shirt I'll iron so you can see how to do it. So you have a wonderful day. The sun is shining here. It's finally warming up. Today's Friday, and this weekend is supposed to go, gosh, even to 0. So I'm really looking forward to it and heading outside. So you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.